All right, this is from the sector lesson PHP Delete, exercise 8. So we're going to work our way through, and we're going to start off by making for ourselves a exercise 8 functions PHP. So this is the file we're going to create. So opening up Dreamweaver, file new, make sure it's PHP, create, and save right at the start. So file, save as, and it's exercise 8 underscore functions.php. Make sure you're in your site, make sure you're in the appropriate place within your site. I've gone to site root. Now, because this is purely a PHP page, I do not need all of the HTML that's down there. So I'm going to delete all that for now because we don't need it. I'm going to go straight to code view because this is purely a code exercise. The first thing we want to make is we want to make a function that's going to load data, and it's going to be as generic as possible. So it'll load data from any CSV file. So here's the basic code for that. Obviously this is a PHP page, so we start off with the standard PHP. And we end that down the bottom here. Right, so this is our function, and the function is made as generic as possible. It just needs to know what's the name of the file, which will be passed to it as a variable called text file variable, and it needs to know what the name of the array is that the data is going to be loaded into. Now we've already got something very similar to this, and as the exercise say, the exercise 3 retrieve page has pretty well got that code, and we're going to start from the file equals statement all the way to the end of the while statement. So let's go and grab that. So here we go across to our exercise 3 save. We're going to start off with the file equals, which is where it opens the file. So that was retrieve. So I'm going to start where the file is open, all the way down to the end of the while statement there, which is down to here. So that's the code we're going to use, and we're going to put that into our function. Just neaten some things up. The copy and paste doesn't always make things as neat as it should be, so I'm going to indent that so that I can see the start and the end of my while statement, see how they highlight, and then this is the information inside. Now, we want to make this generic. So we're going to make some changes here. So instead of having in here a specific file, we're actually going to have this variable. So at that point in the program, we've just replaced the specific file for exercise 3. We've replaced it now just with a file name. So when we use the function, we'll tell it what file name. The other thing we need to change is the array. So rather than having specific array down here, which happens to be array personal details, we're going to replace that just with a generic array name so that it's replaced. So that's replaced everything within that. So that whole function now has been replaced. And we'll save that. So that's now a generic function that will load from a text file into an array. Notice I've got the ampersand there to make sure that the function the program that uses this actually has the array that it's passing actually changed. It's passed directly to it rather than passed as a copy. All right, that's our first function. And let's go on to our next function. So the next function was to save data, very, very similar. Make that as generic as possible. So I'm going to copy the code from there just to save me typing it out again. And this is our save function. And again, same idea. We're just going to use a generic name for the text file and a generic name for the array. In this case, because we're saving it, the array can be passed as a copy. It doesn't have to be the actual array. Bit more work on this one. What we need to do is we need to open the file in write mode. So same thing as we did up here. Here we opened the file. This time we're going to open the file in write mode. So the only difference is this becomes a W. The next thing we're asked to do, looking through here, we're going to do a for each for the array, and we're going to use it to collect an array record. So we're going to do a for each. And we're going to use our array, so that's our $array name, as, and if you go back here, I've said please use this as array record. So that means we get a whole stack of array records that we're going to do something with, and again we're going to use our curly braces and we're going to put some code in there. So looking at what sort of code do I need here? Well, to do our save, what we need to do is make use of the implode function this time. And we're just going to use that array record and implode it, which means we're going to split it up so that there's a variable called text data, which will get the return and new line right at the very start, and then we'll implode by putting a comma between every piece of information in the array record. And the next line we're going to do is we're going to write to the file. So we're going to write to our text data file using that information. And you might recall from our save that how do we write to a file? We just use this fputs. Going to fputs, and the thing we're going to put into the file is this $text data. So that becomes that line. It goes to the loop and does that all the way through, and then just for neatness sake, we always close the file at the end there. And looking back at the load data function, we also ought to do the same there as well. So we'll just add that to the end there too. All right, so the file is closed at the end. All right, we now have our two functions. We need to make sure that file is saved. Good old Control S. So we've now got two functions that could be used. Now, to make sure this is working, we need to do some testing. Now, a piece of code that you've seen before I'm going to use for testing again, and that's our ability just to show an array. So we're going to do a very, very simple test page. This is actually not on the sector page. So file new, PHP page. We'll leave it all as with all the information in there. File, save as, and we call this ex8 underscore test, and we might reuse this page for other tests later on. Just save that. Going to use our include statement. So start up PHP. Make sure we've ended our PHP. Now let's put some code inside there. We need to have our include statement, and we need to include this file we just made. And let's just use our load data. So we're going to do some load data. And our load data command, as you can see here, it's telling us it needs to know the text file name and the array name. And we're going to use the data that we've already got from a previous exercise. So that data was ex3 data.txt. And let's just put it into a test array. So that's going to be the array that we're going to load it into. And to prove that this has actually done something, then we need it to actually display. So I'm just going to make use of that code that we've used before. It's down here in checking a post, where we can just do that using that print R command, which is to print readable, and the thing we want to print readable this time is the array test. So that'll make sure that we've got something there. So let's go ahead and do that. And let's just run that and see if we get something working. So open in browser, go into my Firefox, and we can see that it's loaded it and the information that I had in that. And if you want to check what's actually in that file, of course you could just open it just to double check that that data makes sense. So here's my data, blank line, and then those three people, Robert, John and Fred, and here's Robert, John and Fred, and they have the appropriate data in them. So I've tested my function to make sure that my load data is working. Let's go ahead now and add to our test and check for save data. To do that, let's just save it to another file. So we're going to use save data, open it up, text file name. This time we're going to give it a different text file. Let's call this ex8 data. So it's going to a new file.txt, and it's going to use the data, the array that we've got. So $array tst, which is where the data got loaded to. Let's save that. Let's run it again. Should see the same thing on screen, but hopefully this time, if I go back to Dreamweaver, I now have an ex8 data file. It does seem to take a while to refresh, and I don't know why that is the case. And yes, it took a little while to refresh, but there it is, the ex8 data.txt. And if I open that file up and have a look, I can see it's created the file that I would expect. So that's proved that we've now got a save and a load, and it's nice and generic and will handle any sort of array for us. Okay, that's that.